we at Trine University first want to say thank you for attending our first live stream session of 2020 with some instructors as well as prospective students. We do ask that, or at least for me, unless Dr. Montoya has a different way of doing it, I just ask that you keep yourself muted to respect others, as well as save questions for the end of the presentation. If you have a pressing question, please by all means type it into the chat, and either myself, Dr. Montoya, or even another Shriner faculty individual will be able to answer that question for you. So joining us today in this video chat is Dr. Ben Montoya, Assistant Professor of History. I believe that he's going to be discussing some history or humanities in Brown University, as well as other aspects. But by all means, feel free to ask him any questions about Brown University, the life of it, as well as just anything that might come to mind of student population, the size of classrooms, or what he expects of his students to really prosper, thrive, and be successful. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Montoya.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Vasquez.
Not a problem.
Hopefully you can all hear me. I can only see one of you. Jericho, how you doing? Where are you coming to us from, Jericho?
I'm from Seguin, Texas.
Oh, Seguin, okay. My history colleague, Dr. Coot, is from Seguin, so he's kind of our European history historian. I'm kind of a Latin American historian. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Anyways, good to see you all, and I'm glad to be here with you, as it were, at least virtually. So, as was just mentioned, I'm a history professor. This is my third year here at Shriner. I teach the U.S. history surveys, so history 1301, 1302. So 1301 is, now we see more people. Welcome, everybody. 1301 is basically the first half of U.S. history, 1492 to 1865. 1865 to the present is 1302. And then my upper division courses, I have a class on the Vietnam War, U.S. Latin American relations since the early 19th century, Mexican history, and U.S. foreign policy with the global South during the Cold War. So I look at U.S.-Mexican foreign relations. I look at like diplomatic history, things like that. And I look at immigration as well. And so what I do is Latin American history. We have two other full-time history professors here, one of whom I just referenced, Michael Cood. He's our Europeanist, as it were. He does European history. Leads our learning community, Global Scholars, which unfortunately they had to cancel their trip to Greece this summer. But when things are back to normal, they do summer trips. Last year they went to, of course, it just left my head right now. They go to Romania. Yes, they went to Romania last summer, and I'm sure probably they'll try Greece again next summer. Fingers crossed. And then the third full-time person here, who's been here the longest, she's been here, I think this is probably her 19th year, Jeanette Cockcroft. She also does the U.S. History Survey. A little bit more about Michael Cood. He does the European history intros. So that's history 1350 and 1351. That 1350 is kind of like Western Civ. So he does like ancient Greece to Rome to like ancient India. And then he gets up to European history to about the 17th century. And then 1351 is basically European history from the 17th century to the present. And then he's got great upper division classes on the world wars, right? So World War I, World War II. He's got a class on ancient Roman history, a class on basically just on Eastern Europe and Western Europe as well. And then Jeanette Cockcroft, who does, again, the U.S. history surveys, and then she does Asian history. There's a class on women's history, modern Asian history. So as I tell my students, Shriner only has 3 history for professors full time, but we do a pretty broad regional focus for such a small department. I know where I've only ever gone to big state schools that have like 30 to 40 history professors. And for such a small school, we do pretty well when it comes to representation. Again, I can speak best to anyone interested in a history major, or humanities. I just, on the information I've been given, I see some of you have already expressed interest in certain minors. I'm not sure if I see Sal. Okay, so is that you, Salvatore? You just go by Sal? Okay. I see you're interested in history with a teaching certificate. I don't think John Jackson's here. Doesn't look like it. Jericho, looks like you're interested in business. Is Ian Z here? I don't think he is. And then Annalise. Actually, I don't have your information, Annalise, but feel free to chime in. Tell me what you're interested in. The first thing I should tell you is you want to get familiar with Shriner 1 if you choose to come here. That's going to give you a sense of whatever your major you want to be, the degree plan you need to look into. But that's, getting the cart before the horse here. Let's talk about Shriner in particular. So obviously we are a small liberal arts college. Last time I checked, I think we have about 1,300 students. Our class sizes, so let's see, for me, my intro classes probably max out at about 27 to 28 students. I'm not sure what your education experience has been like thus far, but by way of comparison, if you go to a big state school, big intro classes like History 1301 would probably have anywhere from 200 to 400 students, right? It'd be like walking into a movie theater and just kind of sitting in the midst of it, kind of like it's this amphitheater experience. So contrast that with a classroom at the most with 26 other students, which is great for teaching and for learning because you're able to engage, get to know your classmates, get to know your professors quite well, and you really get to feel that community experience. My upper division classes and probably max out at about 15, right? So the longer you're here and the more upper division classes you have, the more intimate that experience becomes because you have that much more access to professors. We have all kinds of learning communities on campus. If you're interested in medical humanities, for example, that's something we have a specific learning community for that. So we have a honors program, another learning community. I just mentioned one already, the Global Scholars. There's a learning community for business, sciences, and things like this. Most of our students live on campus, right? So that really helps with this community building experience. My water's around here, so I'll be right back.
Brief little intermission. That's all that is.
And so I think something that makes Shriner distinct, and especially for those first 2 years of college, students that freshman year, it's a really tenuous time because it's like you're asking, how do I fit? Not just with classes, not just with the academic stuff. Can I do this assignment? Can I write this paper? Can I pass this test? But how do I fit into the larger community? And when you're on a campus that literally has thousands upon thousands of students, right? So I just gave that figurative example of an intro class with 200 to 400 students. A campus like that would probably have about 30 to 40 students total going to those campuses. Shriner has 1,300. And so just by the nature of being on such a small campus, you're going to fit in a lot easier and just find the places to plug in and people to meet and know the people to talk to. I can give some more detail about the history program in general if that's necessary. But before I do that, there's some questions or maybe even some concerns perhaps, maybe some question marks about Shriner, so as you're thinking about Shriner, maybe in your head, it's just kind of like Shriner question mark. So maybe there's some clarity I can give to those question marks just right from the get-go. So do you guys have any just kind of big, again, not necessarily history department related questions, but just kind of big global Shriner related questions?
Anybody?
So if we will we have the same teacher for 4 years?
Likely not. No, well, you're talking about for specific subjects or for specific majors?
Yes, I would like to major in history. Would we have the same history? Yeah.
Yeah. So this is another key thing too. So you will likely, yes. The short answer is yes. So for my upper division history majors, most of them have now taking classes with me 3 to 4 times. So it's like that with most of our departments. Most of our departments at most have about 3 full-time faculty. So the history department is one of the bigger departments. Some of our departments just have 2, maybe even 1 full-time professor. So yes, depending on what your major is, you're probably going to be taking your upper division classes with this kind of a small rotation of similar professors. So you'll, not only just in the process of one semester getting to know your teacher, but you're going to be taking that teacher likely at least twice, even 3 times. What other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So Annalise, I see that you're interested in business. Okay, so what other questions do we have?
I don't know if anybody has a question, but I'm just kind of curious.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you were telling me more or less about what you were teaching, and
Yes.
there's 2 other instructors or 1 other instructor that also teaches like the history.
Yes, 2. Yeah.
Is it? Do you all teach also the basic courses? I guess the basic intro. So I guess to answer Sal's question, and even looking at different departments, is when you first enter as a freshman, I'm just making an assumption, is they would more or less get to know that instructor from the freshman year all the way through their senior year.
Yes.
And for me, when I did my undergrad in biology, and I know some of you all already heard this story, so I'm gonna save you the spiel on that, is, I got to know my professor, Dr. Distel. I got to know him. I got to know him quite well. And, what that should tell you, even being one-on-one and getting to know these instructors throughout your 4 years, they're going to be there for you every step of the way. They're going to assist you in every matter that you come across, because they've been teaching these subject matters for so long, and they know them quite well that they can look at different angles to be able to present that to you in such a way that you learn it.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, Dr. Distel was one that was very, he doesn't want to teach from a presentation. He doesn't want to teach from a video. Yeah, it's there from time to time, but he's really hands-on. For me, being an environmental major, he wanted us to get outside. He wanted us to go into the field and get into the river. And I'm pretty sure that's how it is with other majors and other subjects, that they really want you to be a part of that field, and they want you to really dive into internship. I've had some friends that I've heard of that have been able to go into psychology and look into internships at local hospitals. For me, being in environmental science, I looked into the city of Kerrville, and I was able to look at different departments. And I know that you're looking at communications majors, business majors, even history majors. Communications and business, that is a passion of mine too. I have my master of business administration, so I know a little bit about the marketing and business side. And I will say that if you just get your undergrad here and you decide, you know what, I want to go somewhere else, these instructors have been phenomenal. They will help you out. So like I said in a different presentation, but I'll say it in this one, is that let's say you get your business degree, or you're looking into law, and you get your undergrad, and you're like, you know what, I want to go to UT. I want to go to A&M and get, my law degree from there. By all means, these instructors are not going to be, just selfish and try to keep you here. They really want to see you thrive and prosper as individuals. So they will get you in contact with someone that they may know in the department over there in a different college, and really try to help you out.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you this. I'm going to help you out every single way and make sure that you are as successful as possible. That's a little bit of mine. I don't want to steal the limelight from you.
No, that's fine. No, I'm glad you said all that, because I think, first of all, it gives us a view from the former trenches, since you're no longer in the trenches. But but I think it speaks to a key part that I really need to emphasize today too, is, and this gets back to Sal's comments a bit, as much as we can, we try to match advisees to advisors who are within their major. So in other words, most of the advisees within the history department will be history majors. So not only are you, Sal, seeing the same professors in the classroom more than once over your career at Schreiner, but you are often their advisee, which means each semester you're meeting with them to talk about classes, talking about course progress, talking about registration for the next semester. And so there's a degree of contact between professor and student that is very, very close. And you almost start to take it for granted when you're at Schreiner long enough. You just kind of just think, oh, this is how things are. But trust me, when you compare it to big state school experiences, which, I went to big state schools, I never had an advisor, as I can remember. I never had a professor who was an advisor. It was just some random person in the admissions building who changed with every semester. At Schreiner, it's not like that. Even if it's a professor who's not in your exact department, it's going to be someone who you meet with, who will be able to check in on your status and really get a sense of how you're doing, and will really, in the best of circumstances, keep you accountable in that sense. Just a couple of other things that stand out from Michael's comment is this idea of Schreiner places a lot of emphasis in undergraduate research. And for some disciplines, it's easier to push this along than others. But in a broad institutional way, the faculty at Schreiner are always focused on how can we not only find dollars towards helping students go to things like conferences and present, but how do we teach them the skills of how to do research? Again, whether that's in a lab or, in my case, when it comes to researching, various written materials. And that's, I think that the ultimate motive for that is to really empower students to take charge of their education experience, but also to, this is relevant whether you want to be a historian or even a business person, to really envision yourself in the professional world, right? This is something to really think about. And I think Schreiner is always trying to do is, college is much more than just about getting a degree and getting good grades and passing classes and things like this, but it's about from 18 to 22, you're transitioning from successfully finishing high school to taking on a professional persona, whether that's in nursing, whether that's in business administration, whether that's in the sciences, whether it's, in my case, being a professional historian. You are thinking about yourself no longer as a student, but you're now thinking of yourself as transitioning to a colleague, as someone who is kind of entering equal status with people in your respective field. And again, that's something that Schreiner is always striving to work hard towards, is how can we get students to do research? I know in the history department, we have an annual conference that we try to take our undergraduates to, where they present papers, right? Where they basically get in front of other people. And it probably sounds a bit scary, and it is a bit scary for when you first do it. Get in front of other people and they share what they wrote. And just the really scary part comes during the Q&A when the presentation's over and it's like, okay, what did you guys think? And then the questions come in, or the chair of the panel actually comments on that student's paper, says, hey, your argument here was okay, but you could have done this better. It can be a pretty scary experience in the moment, but what's happening in that whole process is, again, this fashioning, right? You're kind of fashioning yourself into a professional persona. And we have, again, undergraduate research. I don't think none of you in front of me seem to express an interest in psychology per se, but I know such majors as psychology and psychology communication, they have a pretty strong connection to internship partnerships with various businesses and other partners in Kerrville. And I'm pretty sure, the business department as well. I mean, Michael could probably speak better to that than I could. But in other words, our departments are reaching out, right? It's not, education at Schreiner is not just about, okay, you come to class 2 to 3 days a week and this is where you're getting the gist of stuff. For many of our disciplines, it's about, I know in this psychology department, Dr. Dreeben, one of his upper division classes, they actually rarely meet as a class. Most of the entire semester is working in an internship, depending on what your interest is for that particular class. So in other words, that supportive undergraduate research is not just on campus, it's in the community and really lines up with the students' interest. Let me just add one more thing before I get back to hearing from you guys. I just personally find this exciting when it comes to recreation. I personally am a bicyclist, a biker. I used to live in Colorado, so I really took to trail riding. Something that I'm really excited about, this is maybe more of a selfish thing, is Shriners being plugged into a trail, like the kind of this more and more extensive trail system of the Kerrville area. So in other words, kind of the livability of Shriner as we speak is improving, if you will. So I mean, just those kind of intangible things you want to think about too, of not just what am I going to get academically out of Shriner, but what am I going to get when it comes to what they talk about in other realms, quality of life. And I think you want to think about that when it comes to Shriner. What kind of quality of life am I going to get out of this institution? And, from a faculty point of view, from my point of view, I should say, things like trails and exercise and outdoorsy stuff is important, right? So let's get back to you guys. What other questions or concerns do you have?
No, I can't do all.
So, sorry.
Oh, you go ahead. No.
Okay. Okay. I was going to say, what would you say is a major difference between history class, like major differences or anything?
You're kind of freezing a bit. I wasn't sure if that was just me, but you're freezing a little bit there. I think the question was, what are the major differences between a history class and what else?
Oh, no. What is like something different in college when you're studying history than you would in high school?
Okay. Yeah.
Like, are you in high school? Are you just learning yeah.
So
like, just what are some differences that
Yeah. I think the difference right off the bat is going to be the rigor. I think the amount of reading you have to do, the writing. One big challenge, and I think this is where the more intimate nature of Shriner and knowing your professors and having advisors is really important. A big difference, Sal, is going to be, and then this is a college thing. This isn't just Shriner. You have to be much more self-motivated, right? This because you're not expected to be to class, 5 days a week per se. You are still expected to be a class when your class happens, but there's much more weight on you to kind of step up to the plate and get the job done, as it were. So that's one big difference. And I think another big difference when it comes to history classes, the intros, content-wise, will cover some of the stuff you might have covered in high school, but in our intros, we'll go more in depth. So like my 1301 class, I'll talk about the American Revolution and the Civil War and things like this, but I'll probably go more in depth with it than you were able to in high school. But even more than that, the reading amount and the writing amount and the expectation to participate in class will be really ramped up. And this is depending on how I view it. I view it as a good thing. Some students might view it as a difficult thing, but this is the advantage to a small classroom is that you can't be obscure. When you're in a classroom of 300 people, you can probably imagine the professor's not pointing to, row 56, seat F, tell me what you think about this. It's just the professor speaks for about 50 minutes and then class is over and everyone files out. Well, you can't really hide away in a class of less than 30 people. And so this is, it might be a bit of a shock for some students coming from big high schools, but again, I think it's a really essential advantage that Shriner has, is that it's the intimate nature of the learning process really brings students in. So yeah, I would say, just to round out my answer to your question, Sal, I would say the rigor is what you would really notice between a typical high school class and a typical college class, and the expectation that you are going to keep yourself organized and accountable to get the work done. And again, this is where it's really important to form those relationships with advisors during your first year. Is And this is why much of our freshman studies classes focus just on this. How do you navigate college? And sometimes things as basic as keeping a calendar to things as more difficult as how do I get this paper proofread? How do I go to the right people to check my work? What other questions do we have?
I guess I'm a little bit curious about the Asian history course, mostly as a, not necessarily for a major, but as a
like an elective class, kind of.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
What about as a minor?
Yeah.
Maybe.
History might. Yeah.
I'm just curious about what time period and how.
What time period? Yeah. I haven't looked at her exact class. It's a modern Asia, which I think she covers. I think most of it focuses on the 20th century, probably the 19th and 20th century. So she probably talks about big events like the Chinese Civil War, right? So China becoming communist, World War II in Asia. So obviously talking about Japan, things like that. But I mean, I encourage you, email Dr. Cockcroft and ask her, and she'd probably be happy to share with you a past syllabus to show you exactly what she'd talk about. But yeah, it's probably going to be more 19th century, 20th century Asian history. And she herself studies Chinese history. So when I say, obviously Asia is a huge region. So within her discussion of Asia, she's primarily focused on East Asia. And within that, she's focused on China.
I do have one thing to add.
Yes, please.
And to your kind of responses. From when I was going to Shriner and I was learning from my instructors, I want to say that they don't just teach you a lesson about what's going on in history, or science, or business, or anything. They really, how can I say this? They more so allow you to understand, or they help you understand the concept, something you can take with you and understand. Okay, this is why in marketing or business we are sending out this type of flyer. We're trying to target this type of demographic. We're trying to make sure we hit every single person within this net that we're casting. Mm-hmm. That's just one of the basic concepts that I always try to think about is, okay, I know why they're teaching me this, but why do I need to know this? Sure. That's what I gathered from Shriner was they weren't just teaching me a lesson, because if anything, I can read a lesson in a book any day. But they're here to step by step show you, okay, this is why this happens, the effect, the cause, or in history, I would assume, and I don't think assuming, but in history, they break down, okay, this is what caused the Civil War, and it's from this specific, effect, and it just ripple all the way through.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. And this takes me back a bit to Sal's previous question, and of course, this isn't a denigration against high school teachers at all, but there are pressures that they're under that they're not able to get to some of that depth that we are able to do in college classes. And I think too, Michael's comment gets me back to my previous point of, when it comes to that, like that marketing example, right? Really, the reason those business professors are inculcating those skills is because they're trying to, again, give you that kind of practical application, right? And this is something that the faculty at Shriner is always with amongst its own members, talking about how do we do our bit to help you guys make that professional jump, right? I mean, we're not just in the business of throwing out degrees, and we want students to come in so we can just give them a bunch of degrees and slap ourselves on the shoulder, but it's more of a goal of how can we produce graduates who are going to make a difference, whether it's in education or in nursing or in business. We try to inculcate in students this idea that their education is two things. It's fulfilling a personal goal, and I was connected to that, a family goal, because this is another thing that makes Shriner distinct. And this is something that I really personally feel a part of too, being of a Mexican American background. Many of our students are first generation college students, and so it's a serious family investment, the fact that they're at college. that they're in college. So not only that first goal of trying to really helping students accomplish that family and personal goal of getting a degree, but also the second goal is making them, this might sound very idealistic, but we believe in it. This idea that you're going to produce contributing members of society, members who contribute to the common good.
Mm. Definitely. Well, if there's any questions, what I'm going to do right now, and I don't want to interrupt, is because I know we're kind of reaching that time limit. Zoom is kind of funny that it gives a time limit on something. But what I'm going to do, I'm just putting in the chat 2 email addresses, and I know some of you already got saturated to the point of these email addresses, but for everybody else that does not have admissions goes out to all the admission counselors, so they can definitely help you out. I've also put my personal email address in there for Steiner. That way, if you have a question or you think of something even 10 minutes after this presentation, by all means, send me an email. Like I usually say, that there are no silly questions. I promise you, even if it's like, hey, what's the weather like? What's the temperature? I will reach out and let you know exactly what the temperature is, even if it's like, it's gray, but it's 76 and it's breezy. It's awesome. But definitely, again, I want to say thank you to everybody that came out to the live stream and just, was really a part of it. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. And
I just threw my email there too, in case you want to keep these conversations going. Feel free to take it or leave it. Don't feel like you're obligated to email me. But just since we've met as much as people can through Zoom, right? Feel free to email me, and we can. If you have any follow-up questions that you think of, like right when we finish this meeting, you're like, oh, I should have asked that. Feel free to email me too.
Yeah, definitely. And just know that we are here to help you every step of the way. So if you have questions about history, or I want to know about a psychology professor, or I want to talk to some other professor. I'm interested in this minor now. I'm interested in that minor. You're more than welcome to reach out to us at any point. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, and that's all. And there's no other questions. By all means, I hope you all have a great one and stay safe and be good.
Okay, take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.